Hello viewers, welcome to Disease Reverse and Mitigation Studio. Once again, we are thankful to God for granting us another opportunity to be able to discuss very important matters regarding our health. This day we'll be looking up on a very important topic on fungi, and these are decomposers. Now we want to understand the role of fungi in health. Now, we will be looking at Genesis to locate fungi and see their importance as far as our health is concerned. Now, reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 28, we are told that God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Verse 31 says, And God saw that everything he had made, and behold, it was very good, and the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Now, there are a number of important points I want you to identify from the texts that you have read. And the first thing is that any living organism or microorganism was blessed to reproduce. So one of the identified characteristics of living organisms and microorganisms is to reproduce. Now the other identifying factor of living organisms is movement, because God says, everything that creepeth on the surface of the earth. So all these organisms were blessed by God. Now, do you know that fungi does not move? It only grows. And hence, it doesn't qualify to be a living organism. It is not. We also know that God created all life during the 6 days of creation. And in Genesis 1 verse 31, he declares, Behold, everything was good. So this means there was no decay and there was no death. So we didn't need a decomposer. So fungi were not created during the 6 days of creation because there was no death. Fungi comes as a result of absence of life. And the very first time the presence of fungi is implied is in Genesis chapter 3 verse 19, and this is what we are going to read right away from the book of Genesis chapter 3 verse 18. The Bible says, In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for out of it was thou taken, for thou art dust, and unto dust thou shalt return. So the returning of dust implies the presence of a fungus, because it is the main agent allocated the work of converting a dead body to dust. So after sin, there was death. There was death to living things and living organisms together. So when these die, they undergo what we call decomposition, and that is the work of fungus. Because this is meant to ensure that the dead body or material returns to the earth the energy it had accumulated throughout its life. Now this cycle of returning of energy that an organism or living thing accumulated during its lifetime is called a carbon cycle. Matter is carbon-based, And all matter made of carbon decompose. Once they decompose, they have to return their energy back to the earth so that it can be utilized by the rest of the organisms. And this is how energy is recycled. It is the natural mechanism of recycling of energy. Now, let's look at something else we call the fungal apocalypse, where God pronounces a curse. God pronounces a curse on people and land. And we're going to read from the book of PH 026, chapter 1, verse 3, or paragraph 3, which says, "The Lord's curse, it's upon the earth, upon man, upon beasts, upon the fish of the sea, and as transgression becomes almost universal, the curse will be permitted to become as broad and as deep as the transgression." Now, are you imagining what kind of curse is this that God is going to bring upon all sectors of the world? So it says the disease is contracted by the use of meat. The diseased flesh of these dead carcasses is sold in the marketplaces, and disease among them is the sure result. So how is God going to bring the curse upon all humanity? It's by allowing them to use flesh. And because no meat can be eaten when it is alive, it's only eaten when it is dead. So that is how it's going to bring about diseases, and then a curse will fall on the atmosphere, upon land, and upon every organism living on the earth's surface. So you ever imagine about a disease that can affect the entire civilization? Then it has to do with diseases that come from dead animals. I want to refer you to the 10 plagues of Egypt. God used to narrate to the children of Israel about the diseases of Egypt. But did you ever stop to think about where these diseases came from? Now, during the 10 plagues that were unleashed upon the country of Egypt, all of them involved carcasses or death of living organisms. And the biggest problem the Egyptians had was to deal with dead biological waste. So we had air pollution, land pollution, and water pollution throughout the course of the crisis or the plagues. And that is how they contracted very dangerous infections affecting all systems across the body, because fungus thrives on dead biological material. So that is how they contracted diseases like consumption, which is tuberculosis, brought about by fungus. And this is important for you to know, because the times of the end will be of similar nature. There will be a fungal apocalypse, for the reason that the people of the world have rejected God and they have abused His laws, including nutritional laws. And that is why they are killing animals, eating them, and all this dead flesh breeds disease. There are so many diseases, as we'll find later, that come as a result of consumption of dead carcasses. And some of these diseases are cancerous diseases. God has used fungus or mildew as an instrument of vengeance, as we shall see in the following Bible verses. God has used fungus as an instrument of vengeance. And this you can read from Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 22, which says, "The Lord shall smite thee with a consumption, with a fever, and with an inflammation, and with an extreme burning, and with a sword, and with a blasting, and with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish." Now, I want you to count how many conditions come as a result of fungus. Consumption, which is tuberculosis, is brought about by fungus. Fevers are brought by fungus. Inflammation, fungus brings inflammation. Extreme burning is brought by the sun. And when it is hot, fungus thrives a lot. And then we have specifically the mention of fungus, which is here named mildew. If you read Haggai chapter 2, verse 17, it says, "I'll smote thee with blasting and with mildew." So we have dehydration, or a type of heat, being followed by a fungal disease. So God has used fungus in the past as a weapon of retribution. He is going to use fungus in times of the end as an instrument of vengeance because of the rebellion of people. Now, there was a disease in the Bible that symbolized sin, and it was brought about by fungus. It was called leprosy. So if you read many texts in the Bible does not mention any other infectious disease apart from those diseases of fungal origin. So if you read Leviticus 13 and 14, you're going to see laws that stipulate how dreaded the leprosy or fungal diseases were. And sure, it was a symbol of sin. It is a kind of disease whose contraction is so insidious you may not know, and it is likened to sin because of the spread of that disease and also the damage it causes to man once it has been disseminated in the entire body. So if you read from the Desire of Ages, page 262, we are told that fungus or leprosy is a symbol of sin. So if you read page 262, the one says, "Deep-rooted, ineradicable, and deadly, it was looked upon as a symbol of sin. By the ritual law, the leper was pronounced unclean." So this disease, a person who is diseased from leprosy is said to be unclean, because the way this disease comes, it is as a result of uncleanliness, and it will affect you both externally and internally. So if you have external uncleanliness, it will affect your skin, your respiratory system. If you are unclean internally, it can come in the form of cancer, allergies, tuberculosis, and other diseases that come as a result of fungal infection. So we are told in Desire of Ages, page 262.1, that like one already dead, the leper was shut off from the habitations of men, and whatever he touched was unclean. The air was polluted by his death. Now, why fungal infections are associated with uncleanliness is because water or good sanitation is one of the deterrent factors of fungal infections. And somebody who is said to be leprous, being described as unclean, It's also giving hope, because it can remind us how easy it is to get rid of these diseases by ensuring cleanliness in all spheres of your life, both in the compound, your person, clothes, and also your body. You should be clean to be able to overcome this disease and to avoid contracting the infection. Now, let's understand what is the meaning of fungus. What is fungus? Now, fungus is an eukaryotic organism. Let's be clear here, this is the position of mainstream science, but fungus is not an organism. It's a living thing. Organisms move, fungus does not move. So it's an eukaryotic living thing, such as molds, mushrooms, and yeasts, that belong to their own distinct kingdom. And we know they are separate from plants and animals. We are told they lack chlorophyll, they possess chitin walls, so therefore they are hard, they are tough. They obtain nutrients by absorbing organic matter from their environment. So of importance in this definition is the fact that fungus is not a living organism, it's a living thing, because it doesn't move. All living organisms move. The other thing of importance is it's a decomposer, and it depends on organic matter. Where there is no life, fungus sets in. So by default, with the absence of life, fungus just comes in. Where it comes from, we can't tell. But you know, fungus does not affect healthy living tissues, but it will just crop up by default once the person or the body becomes dead. So that is important. The other thing we need to know is that it can grow very fast. In fact, we have fungus that start as unicellular, and then they grow and they become multicellular. We also know things like mushrooms grow very fast. So that is one of the characteristics of fungus. It doesn't have chlorophyll because it depends on dead organic matter. And one other thing we need to know is that once the dead organic matter is depleted, you can't tell where fungus goes. Maybe it blends with the organic matter, waiting for other dead bodies to fall into the soil. But once the dead organic matter is clear, you can't find fungus. But fungus is also important when it comes to the ecosystem, because it enables the plant roots to communicate and also to harness energy from the soil. So it's important. Being a decomposer, it also helps to clean the earth's surface. It's like a janitor that gets rid of dead and decaying biological matter on the soil. And this is how God developed a mechanism of cleaning the earth's surface by using fungus. Now, we also have types of fungus, and we have many types of fungus. As you can see, we have Chytridiomycota, we have Zygomycota. All those are types of fungus. You don't have to memorize these names, but of importance is all fungus or fungi produce spores, and this is the way they are able to disseminate or to spread. And these spores are very poisonous. And because they're poisonous, we need to ensure we do not keep dead and decaying matter in our compound. We should clear all dead tissue in the house. For those who are fond of eating dead flesh, and you keep it in the house, in the fridge, always beware of fungus, because fungi are very destructive and poisonous. Now, as we move on, let's look at the characteristics of fungi. And I consider this slide very important because these characteristics will enable us to know how we are supposed to interact with fungi. Now, the first characteristic is that they are eukaryotes, meaning they contain a DNA. They have a DNA or RNA, so they are not like other microorganisms such as bacteria. These ones are more advanced, and they are able to grow on their own without depending on the host. Then they don't make their own food, and that is why we say they are heterotrophic. They feed on food materials arising from dead and decaying matter. And as they are feeding, they grow threads we call hyphae. And these hyphae are able to form a network that penetrates into tissues and digesting them. So those hyphae have tips that are able to penetrate into tissues. So fungi or fungus will behave the same if it enters our bodies. It would generate roots or threads we call hyphae that will poison our cells as they reach out for the substrate or for the nutrients. Then the fungus digests by releasing enzymes that are very toxic. These enzymes are toxic to body cells. And that is how they manage to break down or to lyse tissues and access the glucose and the glutamine contained in those tissues. They also have a rigid cell wall, which is composed of chitin and glucans. And this chitin and glucan is the one that makes, if you have a tumor as a result of a fungal infection, it makes the tumor so hard. It even makes it inaccessible to the body's immunity because it hardens because of this cell wall we call chitin or glucan. And then fungi are multicellular organisms which are made of hyphae which grow a network called mycelium. But you know, yeast is notable single-celled. So yeast is single-celled, but then it can puff up, it can grow into a very big organism. So that is how yeast is able to make a dough of flour to swell, because it can grow, despite the fact that it's unicellular. But fungi can grow from a unicellular to a multicellular organism, living thing, which will be huge and destructive to the area that the fungus is growing. Then fungi reproduce both sexually and asexually. So this means they are not limited. That is why they are able to grow on dead matter of all sorts. And if they cannot reproduce sexually, if the conditions do not allow sexual reproduction, then they can break apart, and wherever they are deposited, they can metastasize and start growing in any organ in the body without having to depend on a male or a female gamete. So that is why we say their mode of reproduction is both sexual and asexual. So that is why when you have a fungal infection, it can metastasize and it can release spores that can grow at any part of your body. Then something else we need to note is that fungi store energy as glycogen, not starch, as used by plants. So they store energy in form of glycogen. Now this means the energy molecule called glycogen has more branches than starch, and therefore it carries more energy than starch would carry. So that is the way fungi are able to survive, by drawing for themselves huge energy stores. And this enables them to grow very fast, because glycogen is a ready store of energy whenever it's needed by fungi. And then fungi have a cell membrane which is made of algosterol, which is a tougher membrane than the cholesterol that makes the membranes of body cells. So they are able to break down the cells of the body. If we get a fungal infection, it will be disastrous, because it has tough, very tough tissues. Now let's come to the last aspect of this presentation, and we shall be comparing fungal cells and cancerous cells. This will help us to know that we could be dealing with fungal cells or some diseases that are of fungal origin without knowing. Now, are you aware that fungal cells rapidly mutate? They also grow very fast, and in addition, they are lethal because they produce mycotoxins. So that is why we said fungus can reproduce by both sexual and asexual, and they will change depending on the dead organic matter they are encountering with. So it is the only living thing designed by God to adapt to very toxic environments and different organic or dead decaying matter. So that is how they rapidly mutate to survive the dead tissue and to break it down. And they also grow very fast, because once they break down the cells of the dead matter, they get out of it glutamine, which enhances their growth, and also glucose for energy. Did you also know that fungal cells are immortal? This means once an organism dies, the cells that continue to survive are fungal cells. And fungal cells will continue to survive all the organisms, and fungus will be the last living thing that will be found on the earth's surface when Jesus returns, because they survive where there is a dead tissue. So that is why we say they are immortal. They do not die. They will continue to digest all the dead tissues. They will succeed all living things and organisms. So we say they are immortal. But we know they start as benign cells and then they change to malignant. Especially in the body, if you have a fungal infection, if you have dead cells in your body, because fungus loves uncleanliness. If you read the book Education, page 189.5, it says that it is diseased and dead organisms where fungal roots or fungus thrives. So once you have dead cells and the body is not able to eliminate them by a process called autophagy, that is clearing all dead tissue, then that dead tissue will be infested by the fungus, and once it is infested, the fungus will start to grow, and the body will try to encapsulate that area so that as long as that area is encapsulated and the fungal roots or hyphae have not invaded outside the tissue, then it remains a benign tissue. But when the fungal roots, what we call hyphae, when they start invading the adjacent tissue, and your body is trying to continue to seal that area so that the fungal toxins are not let out into the blood. If the fungal roots multiply or are generated at a faster rate than your body's immunity is able to seal that area, then we are going to have metastasis. That is, the fungal toxins are going to be released into the bloodstream, and eventually you're going to have what we call a malignancy as a result of fungus. Then fungal cells do not have adhesion molecules. It's important for you to understand this because all cells that are natural, that are healthy, stick together. That is why the body is able to identify or to differentiate between different cells. Cells for the ear, for the eye, for the skin, So we are eating the same food, but when it comes to the human DNA, it is able to allocate the work of repair of cells by the type of cell. And different types of cells will adhere together. The cells of the skin, they know themselves, they have adhesion molecules for the cells of the skin. The cells of the eye, the same. So they have ways to mark themselves out and to identify so that cells do not attack each other. So we have what we call cellular communication. It is not so with fungal cells. They have no adhesion molecules. They can be released anyhow, and that is why they can easily metastasize. They break off from a tumor that has grown to be malignant, and the fungal cells will metastasize into any part of the body. That is why you hear that all diseases of fungal origin can affect any organ in the body. So which are those diseases? Tuberculosis, cancer, diseases such as asthma, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus. These are diseases that will affect any organ in the body as long as it has a blood supply. And the reason for that is fungal cells do not have adhesion molecules, so they don't stick together. They can metastasize to any part of the body. Now, the other thing you need to know about fungal cells is that they are unregulated and unresponsive to cellular signals. So they do not listen to any, you see, they are foreign to the body. So they do not respond to signals from the cells to stop growing. So they grow and multiply and mutate in a disorderly manner. So that is why anybody who has a cancerous tumor, you find that the tumor can grow in any direction. It is rough, it is tough, and this is because of the fungal cells. Then another factor about fungal cells is that they attract blood vessels to them. So they are angiogenic. They will lyse and they will ulcerate. And these are very important points I need to emphasize because whenever there are fungal cells growing on a diseased cell or a dead tissue in the body, now the tendency of the body is to mobilize as much supplies as possible in form of oxygen, nutrient cells to that area. And one of the intentions of the body is to ensure that the fungal toxins being released from the tumor do not come into contact with healthy body cells. So that is why those tumors end up having a lot of blood supply covering the entire mass all over to ensure that the fungal toxins do not come into contact with the rest of the healthy cells. So we say it is not, so that process of growing new blood vessels overlying the tumor is called angiogenesis. Angio means blood vessels and genesis means the origin of new blood vessels. Then we know that fungal toxins lyse cells. So they are breaking down cells by using their enzymes. And these enzymes are toxic to body cells. So that is why, as they lyse these cells, they cause what we call damage and ulceration to the tissue that is neighboring. So one thing that is characteristic of fungal tumors is that they lead or they cause ulceration. That is why when you find people with cancerous tumors like breast cancer or ulcers in the legs, they end up ulcerating, forming a cavitation or a depression. And any ulcer which has a fungal infection is likely to turn into a cancerous ulcer. That is why we take biopsy of such ulcers in case they are chronic and they have taken a long time without getting healed. The other characteristic of fungal cells is they are hungry for glucose and glutamine. Sorry. So they are hungry for glucose and glutamine because they need a lot of energy to grow. They grow very fast, and that is why they need resources in terms of glucose and glutamine. And because they start by killing the surrounding cells, after killing those cells, the cells can generate glucose and glutamine. But we also know that fungal cells are fermenters. So in case there is no glucose or glutamine, they start metabolizing by a process we call fermentation. And this is possible for them because they are decomposers. How they are able to cause decomposition on a dead body that has no blood supply can only be by fermentation. So decomposition, by the way, occurs through the process of fermentation because a dead body does not have oxygen supply, does not have glucose supplies. So fungal cells are adapted to fermentation. And you could have heard that the other cells that ferment are cancerous cells. So there's no difference between fungal cells and cancerous cells. We are talking about the same thing because a cancerous tumor also relies on fermentation for metabolism, and so are the fungal cells. So fungal cells, cancerous cells, those are synonymous terms. The other thing you need to know about fungal cells or fungal tumors is that they are rigid and tough. So if you've ever touched somebody with breast cancer, if you compress that mass, it's tough and rigid because the cells that are in are not living, they are dead. And they are dead because they have been poisoned by fungus and there is no blood supply. One property characteristic of body tissues that are healthy, that are well supplied with blood, is that they are elastic, but not so with a cancerous tumor or a fungal tumor. It is so hard and tough. That is why blood does not reach the core of the tumor. And not only blood, even if these patients were to undergo chemotherapy, chemotherapy does not reach the core of the tumor. So that is when oncologists describe the tumor as resistant to chemotherapy. It's not about resistance. How do you expect chemotherapy to reach the core of the tumor if it doesn't have blood supply? Then another property of fungal cells is that they have a small or a tiny nucleus to cytoplasm ratio. So they have very small nuclei, but a large component is the cytoplasm. And that is also typical of cancerous cells. That is, a small nucleus, but a very big or large cytoplasm. Okay? And this could be the reason. The reason could be because these are fermenters and they rely on the lytic enzymes a lot. So that is why they have a large cytoplasm so that they can generate adequate lysozymes to digest the dead cell. Something else that fungal cells are characteristic for, they're also similar to cancer cells, is that they can evade immunity. Mycotoxins evade immunity a lot. So the only option the human immune system has against mycotoxins and fungal spores is to isolate them. But there are no antibodies. There are no antibodies. Listen to this. There are no antibodies against mycotoxins. The only known mechanism the body uses to isolate fungal toxins or mycotoxins is by isolation. And that is the truth of the matter. So if the body ever made antibodies against, I think it could not match the toxicity. Fungal toxins, mycotoxins are extremely toxic for body cells. And that could be the reason why we lose the war on cancerous and malignant tumors. Because how does the body is so weak when it comes to dealing with mycotoxins. It's like dealing with poison. And the fungal tumors they will exhaust the body's immune system because they will release so many mycotoxins into the blood. And that is why patients they can have multiple metastases. So they can have metastasis everywhere, but the body is not able to combat those metastases simply because it is extremely difficult for the body to design antibodies each time the mycotoxins are released. That is how they are able to evade the body's immunity. And that is why when a cancer metastasizes, most likely, apart from very few cases, the patient has no chance once metastasis has occurred. You have to build your immune system. You have to strengthen your immune system to an extent it has to overcome the burden of mycotoxins being released by the fungal tumor. And you cannot build an immune system by using very toxic chemotherapy because chemotherapy targets the immune system. So any treatment that is not going to boost the immune system, it's like you're condemning the person who has the fungal tumor. And of course, something else I need to talk about here concerning fungal tumors is they are known for metastasis. Okay, so fungal tumors can metastasize. That is the last point. They also invade neighboring tissues. So how do they metastasize? They metastasize by releasing fungal spores. And once these fungal spores are released, they go into different organs in the body where they can attach, and especially the organs with dense blood supply, such as the lungs, the liver. So those organs have dense blood supply. They also have capillary beds. So they have areas of diffusion. So that is why fungal mycotoxins have a predilection for those sites. The fungal mycotoxins also spread to the lymph nodes because that is the other area of the body where drainage or eradication of infectious agents is done and where the body's immune system is sensitized. So that is why they are the very first areas to be affected by metastasis from fungal tumors. Now, if you look at the other side, when we talk of cancerous tumors, we are talking of the same thing. Cancerous tumors are also fungal tumors. But then there is something else we need to know, because one of the positions of the scientific establishment is that cancerous cells can metastasize. And this is not true. Because if cancer comes from mutation of your body cells, please note this important point. If the cancer is coming from your body cells and you have what we call rapid cell division, anytime a cell becomes diseased, it is isolated by the body and it is marked for destruction. So there's no way your body, the healthy tissues, will integrate a cell that is diseased. So there is no way metastatic cells or cancerous cells can metastasize or move out of the primary site and then be accommodated in other organs. It's not possible. Because once the cells have been marked as diseased, they lose what we call adhesion. They lose what we call cellular communication. So there is no chance of those cells being received in other organs. And by the way, did you know, if you think of the cancerous cell metastasizing to the liver and being integrated, that does not happen. Because cells identify each other through what we call adhesion molecules. So cells of the liver adhere together. Cells of the lungs adhere together. So if there is a metastasis from the ovary, the liver will not accept a cell from the ovary. And if it is a mutated cell, then it will not accept it the more. And the reason is because our body tissues can mark out what belongs to themselves and what is foreign. But if it's a fungal spore, because of its ability to attach to tissues and because of its ability to poison and to break down cells, that is how they are able to attach to new sites and they start growing, and they grow very fast. If a metastatic cell from a primary tumor, that is, if we assume the cell was coming from the body, it has only mutated and overgrown, if it's released so that it moves to another site, it will not be accommodated or allowed to integrate with the new tissue, with the distant tissue. And the reason is because it does not belong there. Number two, because the cell is sick and it is only healthy tissues that accommodate each other. So that cell will be foreign to the body. Then we also do not expect cells that are mutated to continue to reproduce. The law of life dictates that if a cell is sick, if an organism is so sick to the extent its genetic material has been changed, then we do not expect that organism or that cell to continue to reproduce. So mutated cells do not reproduce. So the question is, how does a cancerous tumor become large? It becomes large because each time the fungal roots are penetrating into the tumor, the body has to mobilize the immune system, cells, and materials to the surface of the tumor to shield the toxins from coming into contact with the rest of the healthy cells. And by so doing, the tumor continues to grow and to become bigger and bigger as the body continues to mobilize resources. So it's not that the cells are growing. It is not like the cancerous cells or the fungal cells are growing. No, it's the healthy cells surrounding the tumor that are mobilizing resources that are causing the tumor to grow from outside. So the tumor grows from outside, not from inside. The inside of the tumor has dead cells. And if those are cancerous cells, they should be growing, but they don't grow. That's why they are white. And they are white because they don't have blood supply. The tumor grows from outside, and that is why it gets bigger. And whatever is making the tumor to be big is because of the healthy cells that are trying to encapsulate that tumor to prevent the fungal toxins from being released into the blood. So that is important, and it's worth noting. Do you know that if we assumed that metastatic cells or cancerous cells were metastasizing and causing lesions to start in other distant tissues or sites, then why is it that no genetic test has ever detected a metastatic cell in transit in the blood? None, nada. So even people who have been in stage 3 and stage 4 cancer, they have not been identified because people always present late with cancer. Some have donated blood, the blood has been screened, and no metastatic cells or cancerous cells were found. Why? If the cancerous cells metastasize, why have the modalities of screening not been able to detect those cancerous cells? It's because what metastasizes is not cancerous cells. Those ones cannot metastasize. Even if they metastasize, they will not be accommodated in the new tissues and the new sites. So what metastasizes are the fungal spores. So those ones can attach anywhere and they are toxic. They'll start growing anywhere they land. Then the other explanation is, do you know there are some metastasis that has been detected without the finding of the primary site of the cancer? So we have patients, we call patients with cancers of undetermined primary site. So the only thing that can be seen is the metastasis. Now how is that? Where did the metastasis come from? The best explanation for that is the fungal toxins or spores, because they can grow in any diseased and dead cells anywhere. So they just start growing. And because they are hungry for sugar and glutamine, they grow very fast. And if you do a PET scan, they are detected very fast because they are hungry for glucose. So that is the explanation we can give to the gray areas or the unexplained areas about cancer, because people always ask, what is happening with cancer? It's like we are in darkness. We are told mutation, but we know when cells mutate, they don't multiply any further. They just die. So the best explanation for the dead cells is the fungus that has high affinity for dead cells. It will start growing and then it will cause metastasis. So to say that cancerous cells can grow, it's like saying a very diseased, mutated organism will continue to grow. And we have seen people who have mutations such as dwarves, such as giants, such as albinos. These people are not many. They lose the ability to regenerate and to reproduce. And they should be characteristic of every cell or body tissue that is natural and that was created by God. We expect cells that are sick, mutated, not to continue reproduction. Because if all sick cells continue to reproduce, the kind of damage our bodies would have, including for those people, everybody could be having cancer. If mutated cells were reproducing at the speed we are told of cancer cells, then I think everybody could have cancer. Why? Because daily we are generating cells with defective cells on a daily basis, more than 10,000 of them, because the body is replacing billions of cells daily, and these cells have defect. So if every defective cell, which means it's a mutated cell, was abnormally divided, then all of us could be having cancer. But the only explanation that fits for this condition is these are fungal cells. If we do not entertain fungus, then there is no way we can be defeated by cancer. So we have to ensure cleanliness. We have to ensure that we take clean water so as to get ready to enhance the excretory mechanisms such as the kidney, the colon, the lungs and the skin, to get rid of waste. Because this waste, if it accumulates in the body, it attracts fungus. Now we have come to the end of this presentation. God bless you. Continue to like, share, and subscribe, and let me see your comments on the comment section. Bye-bye. Thank you.